Okay. Joe, I mean, that's a soprano recorder.
Yep.
And, you know, like you have 4 different recorders here. I only know of recorders being an instrument that like my grandson plays.
Right.
Well, it's like the first instrument that kids play.
Right.
But evidently these are totally different.
Yeah, well, the soprano is a soprano. Kids usually play instruments made out of plastic.
Right.
These are made out of wood, and they're handmade. But they're, the recorder's a recorder.
I played with you on a Charles Fambro record about 20 years ago. And it stayed in my mind that someone could play the recorder like you played the recorder. You got to explain to me like how you got into playing this instrument and the approach that you used to playing it.
When I was a child, I loved to improvise, and then eventually I heard people like Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane.
Wait a minute. As a kid, Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane?
Well, no, as a kid I liked to improvise. I heard Sonny Rollins probably when I was 10 or 11.
Boy, what the world has changed, huh?
Yeah. And St. Thomas was really got me, and Mercy Mercy by Cannibal Adderley got me.
Right.
And those were kind of my way in. And Equinox. Those
John
3
Coltrane.
tunes at the beginning were really got me into wanting to hear more and play more of that kind of music. What really got me was hearing the Miles Davis Roundabout Midnight record.
But you were 11 years old.
Yeah, at that point, maybe 12 or 13.
But I think that what's great. I mean, see, things have changed so much, but that was the music back, you know, at that time that was the more interesting and great music. And so this is what got you into playing the recorder the way that you play it?
Yeah. Yeah, again, what really got me was when I heard something. It was actually a couple of years after that. I heard a Coltrane solo, and it was the stuff he was playing with Miles, but it was something about his sound. And I heard that sound, and that changed my life.
Well, but 2 points. At the time that you were a kid, you know, the Beatles and you know, there was a lot of different kinds of pop music going on.
Yeah.
So why did you gravitate to jazz as opposed to the pop music? And the second part of the question is, okay, so you heard John Coltrane play and he played a tenor saxophone. Why didn't you go to play tenor saxophone?
The music, so I listened, we used to listen to the radio a lot then. There was no internet. And so I used to listen to the radio in Philadelphia growing up, and I heard a lot of Motown, and there was a lot of great music there, and the Beatles were there, and but there was a radio station, WRTI,
of course,
from Temple University,
right.
And I used to listen, and again, it was the music that got me. It was the music, and there were particular DJs who were very good because they had interesting things to say about the music. There was one guy I think Edgar Brown the Hawk, who used to. I remember now a show he did about Wayne Shorter that changed the way I listened to Wayne Shorter. It was an amazing. He just talked about influences on Wayne Shorter going back to Lester Young, and he would play things and follow it through, and I would hear this stuff, and it was beautiful.
You know, that's an interesting point, because I guess the DJs back at that time period, they made good choices, and they were informational choices. They gave good information. They gave good information, and they educated the listeners. So now, today, the reason why people don't gravitate to jazz is because they're ignorant. They just don't really know about it. But at that time period, when you were coming up, the DJs were very informative about the music and the backstories about the music and the artists.
Well, and there's that one side. That was one side of it. The other side of it was something that you were a part of. So Jimi Hendrix was coming along then.
Yeah.
But then you have this movement of people like Miles Davis into those areas, and things began to come together. I mean, and that's more of your story than my story, but that's what I was listening to. And so I was getting it sort of in the street that way.
Right.
And I was getting it on these radio stations the other way.
So we played together 20-something years ago. And then we were out of touch.
Yeah.
Explain what happened after that.
So many things. I'm not sure. I had some health problems and thought that I would. I had gotten away from playing, and I felt that I needed to get back to playing. And we had connected, and I knew you were still active. And Charles Fambro, who we both knew, had been very sick, and we had sort of reconnected around that.
Did you come to his memorial?
I didn't make the memorial. I knew about it. I was living in Toronto at that point, and
That's
there was
right.
something about the timing of it that I couldn't make. But I was in touch with Dolores, his wife, and a lot during that time. And you and I spoke about that because of some tapes. I don't know if you remember. There were a lot of there's a lot of things going on with the family. But we met on that recording session, and so and we had gotten along well and kept in touch. And I called you and said that I wanted to record, and you were encouraging about that, and that's.
But I thought that it was a very challenging idea and a challenging project to take the recorder and dedicate an album to someone who plays recorder as well as you do, and so that's why it was a challenge. And I know we spoke about it a lot, about the fact that to take this instrument and how to project this instrument into today's culture and make it work.
Well, so that was very, very challenging and very gratifying for me, because you pushed me to tie up some loose ends that I had never tied up, and I still really haven't tied them up, but I'm working on it. And like I said at the beginning, it was saxophone players mainly who had attracted me. And you, as much as you might love John Coltrane, you could never do what John Coltrane did. I mean, you could never be John Coltrane, and you could never do what John Coltrane did on the recorder, as much as you might want to.
No, but let me ask you a question. Is there a recorder community? I mean, are there other recorder players out there that you are in touch with?
There are a few I know about. I don't know any of them well. Living in I think she's living in New York now. There's a young woman named Tali Rubenstein. I think that's her name, and she's performing and trying to make it, and plays recorder and sings, and does some straight ahead playing. There's a guy in France, and I apologize if I butcher his name, Benoit Salvé, who you can see on YouTube. He's transcribed and played some solos, but he's an improviser. He has a website. And there's an Italian, Gianluca Barbero, who I'm a little bit more in touch with. And there is the makings of a community there, and I think probably it would be good if we could all be in touch and work together in terms of the instrument, because establishing a tradition where the recorder is in various kinds of improvised music would be a great step.
Yeah, because the history of the instrument, it's a very old instrument.
It is, yeah. It goes back probably to medieval times or before. It's a whistle flute. It is.
That's the whistleblower.
That's the whistleblower. That's, yeah.
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 Cut.